Good afternoon, everyone. It's Abel Sampson from Car Design News. I'll be hosting this week's live stream from an extremely sunny Old Windsor next to Heathrow, where we have no planes taking off at the moment. We're super excited, as always, to have some of our extremely senior design leaders talking today from the College of Creative Studies and a special guest speaker from Ford. But before we get started, I just want to run through some housekeeping just to make sure that if you guys have any challenges, we have a chat box. Please fill it in and my colleague Vanessa will jump in and solve any issues. If you do have any other videos running at the moment, or you're streaming anything, because bandwidth is extremely important for some of the things we're going to show you, please switch it off. If you do lose audio or video, best thing to do is just switch off and relog in. It will happen pretty much instantaneously. We will be recording this, so don't panic. If you have missed a bit, you'll be able to watch it. And throughout the whole of the live stream, it's important and an opportunity for you guys to ask some questions. So please field the questions. They will be asked throughout, depending on how quickly I can read them. If you do ask a question and it's not answered at the time, don't panic, because we're actually going to send the questions to the team afterwards, so we'll be able to cover that. So before we get started, I get to do a fun bit of my job, is to tell you what's going to happen next. So we're going to start with, let me just quickly share my screen with you again. We're going to start with some of the key highlights from the week. This is a fun part of my job where I get to actually look at the industry and see what's out there from a design perspective, kind of simplify it for you guys. So one of the key highlights from last week was the CDN Ford live stream with the team using VR, doing an actual demo. We had Moray Callum, Amco Lienert, Kemal Kurik and Joel on the live stream. I think it's important to remember these guys are located in LA, Detroit, Michigan, and in Holland. So to have them all actually run through a demo, which was super cool, and also allowed to see them, we got to see them putting the headsets on, doing it, and in some cases looking quite cool or not so cool, if you like. We had just over 1,200 people view the stream, whether it was live itself or the recording, and we've just seen those numbers go up and up. So this is a great opportunity and a very ambitious thing to do, and great for Ford to actually be willing to show how they are actually dealing with the challenges of working on design virtually, but doing it in such a creative way. The next one was the world premiere of the GTR 50 by Ital Design. I got a chance to look at it, have a detailed look at some of the images and some of the additional sketches that came out. And you know, it's quite nice to see that the Ital Design stayed very loyal to the 2018 concept. And if you want to read a little bit of a bigger report on it, go to Car Design News and you'll see that. And as I've agreed with a colleague, the lights on that vehicle are totally mental. So please go and have a look. We also have seen, and there will be a post going up on Car Design News today for the updates of the BMW 5 Series and the Mini Countryman. Quite similar in their approach of what they've done with the vehicles. They've really messed with the grills a bit, made them a lot bigger, taken them down into the bumpers, which is a slightly different design. And the lights, again, have taken a massive leap forward on both of the vehicles. So it's quite consistent that lights are a really good brand identity of a vehicle. So those have kind of been very important. And the Union Jack has come back to the Countryman. We have mixed feelings. I was discussing it with a colleague as well on how we feel about it. Very iconic thing that they created, but they brought it back for the Countryman, which is quite cool, I think. And on a more somber note, McLaren to lose 1,200 jobs. We've been monitoring this very closely across all the divisions of Ultima Media. We haven't really heard anything in design, and finally, we actually got an Instagram tweet from a senior design leader saying there's definitely going to be some job losses in design. So that is a shame. We'll keep you updated on Car Design News and Ultima Media when those changes. Now, we're going to actually run a poll, which I'm going to launch now. Okay. Right, so just bear with me a second. I don't think you can see my screen at the moment. So what we're going to do is you can actually see the poll. I've just launched it. So how has COVID-19 affected employment in car design? Obviously, this is an extremely difficult time, and there's some serious questions here. On Car Design News, we pride ourselves of running some of the most senior positions within car design. And if you go to the website, there hasn't been some posts for quite a while. So it'll be interesting to see what the results are, both for students and for professional designers who both will be on this call. So we're just going to give it a few more seconds. The results are coming in. And not surprisingly, before I put up the answers, reduction in jobs seems to be coming out on top. I think we're just about ready to close the poll. So I apologize if you couldn't see my screen at the early stages. Don't panic. We'll make sure we get those up, but we covered some key aspects of what's happened in the week of design. So I think we can close the poll now. And we're just going to share some of the results with you. So as you can see, as expected, reduced number of job roles on offer seems to be a restricted and or hiring process. We've obviously seen a situation with the salaries as well, which is a challenge in its own right. The economies across the world are being hit by it, so we're not surprised to see those sort of results. Okay. Let's hide that. Okay. Right. So now you've got me back, and now I'm going to bring back into the conversation. If I can get Paul Schneider to hit his make his camera live and unmute himself. We've got Joel from Ford. Joel, can you also hit your camera and unmute yourself? And we've got Jason from CCS as well. So can we have a big wave from all of you to our audience? Excellent. Now, it would be great if, we'll start with you, Paul, but if each of you, running in Joel, Paul, and Jason, if you can run through exactly where you are now in location, the city, where you are, what your job responsibility is, and then we'll go through each of you systematically. So, Paul, can you take it away and tell us where you are and what your job responsibility is at CCS?
Sure, thanks, Abel. I'm Paul Snyder. I'm the chairperson of transportation design at the College for Creative Studies. And I am joining you from just outside Detroit. The school itself is in Detroit, but as we all know, we're still under a bit of distancing restrictions. So I'm at home in my studio. It's about 30 minutes from downtown where the Tubman campus is, where we teach.
Okay, can I head over to Joel now? Can you tell us where you are and your job responsibility? Your connection with CCS.
Sure, I'm Joel Pieskoski. I work at Ford Motor Company as Global Design Director for Cars and Crossovers. And I'm here at home, just outside of Detroit as well, working from home, as we have been doing since March 16th. So we are home officing and we really haven't missed a beat, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that through this process of the video chat.
And Jason, thank you, Joel. Jason, it looks like they've locked you up at the College for Creative Studies studio. Looks like you're in the studio right now. And are you in lockdown in the studio, or where are you situated at the moment?
I'm actually at home. What's on the wall behind me are all the live demos that I did for students over the course of the semester. But I'm also just outside of Detroit in Ferndale, Michigan, which is about 20 minutes north of Detroit. I'm an assistant professor at the College for Creative Studies working for Paul. Principally, I teach freshmen who are just coming in, sometimes sophomores, but I teach visual communication, freshman transportation, a variety of subjects during the year.
Thanks, guys. And just so if none of you know Detroit or Michigan very well, Ferndale is by far the coolest location where all the hipsters are. Would you agree, Joel and Paul, where all the cool kids hang out?
I would,
Definitely
yeah.
the place.
Probably true. Yeah. I keep waiting for someone to knock on my door and say, "Sorry, Jason, you're not cool enough. We're gonna have to ask you to leave."
No, it's great to see you, and it's great to see you guys are all working remotely and all extremely positive. And I love the setup, Paul, of your studio. Is it your studio? We're actually
Studio office.
Around of your studio. Can you tell us any highlights that are in it?
Sure. You know, when we had to transition, we had to pivot to home teaching or remote teaching and remote learning. You know, I've done a lot of painting. I've done, you know, I dabble in music and things like that. But what I needed to do is set up some kind of demo table. Because of my responsibilities at school, I need to attend all the sponsored project presentations at the junior and senior level. So I take it upon myself to also teach early Viscom classes, Viscom 1, particularly this last semester. So I set up a demo table with a camera above it, and there's a few of the demos on the wall back there. Yeah, so it's my little studio. It's pretty cool. I feel extremely fortunate to have this place that I could go back to and, you know, work through the final months of the semester during what was pretty challenging but extraordinarily successful, all things considered.
Excellent. I think now we're actually going to get down to the business end of it, and you know, one of the successes of the back end of 2019 was the Mustang. Most definitely, Joel, you should be so proud of that vehicle. We were very honored to have you do a live presentation at the CDN LA Forum, and we're going to go ask Jason to show us a video of some of the students, how they've embraced the challenges of being in lockdown. So can we hand over the screen to Jason, and can we all turn off our cameras? It just takes a few seconds to get the screen sharing across to Jason. So if you guys bear with me just a second. Okay, as we seem to be having a few technical issues, can I get you guys to turn on your cameras again?
Oh, I just got the notification, Abel.
Okay, well, let's go then. I'll turn my camera off. It's all yours, Jason.
Okay. So animations have been a part of CCS curriculum for quite a while, even going back to when I was in school. But since we had no physical properties to finish this semester, it absolutely became a center stage for students as a showpiece. This animation features a Mustang Studio concept that was done by Ryan Schlotthauer and Lichen Zhang, and it's called the E51. It's slated for 2030. Their objective was to establish Mustang as a sports car brand for the tech generation. As you can see already via this presentation, the digital nature lends itself to that objective. What I really love about the video they put together is the story that it shows. They understand that in order to sell a design really well, especially now, you have to tell a story. And they could have just as easily shown this car on a turntable spinning around, and that would have accomplished the goal, but that wouldn't have been very compelling. So they came up with the idea of using an assembly line, and I think it's fantastic because you can almost picture us, viewing the car via a camera mounted on an arm that's just floating around the vehicle, not all that dissimilar to the arms that are assembling the car. And here we get a really nice look at the interior. We pan back out and we can see the exterior. They're also taking advantage of the glass roof to show you details. You even get a nice the double image there of the beveling on the edge of the glass, which I really like. And as we pan out here and the doors close and we go to the side of the car, you'll see how the lettering that's on the floor and the general environment of the assembly line reflects into the car and is used as a visual communication tool. Certainly more compelling than zebra stripes to show the form. There it is right there, you can see. When we showed this animation, or sorry, not we, when Ryan and Leachin showed this in their presentation to Ford, it was followed by audible silence and some sort of voce wows from a lot of people, which is probably the best reaction we could expect. And it went over extremely well with everyone, and definitely shows that just because we're in a situation where we can't do physical properties doesn't mean that we can't have a lot of wow factor and put our best foot forward. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. If you can all switch your webcams back on now. Excellent.
Thanks, Jason.
So,
that was a really a good explanation.
Oh, thank you.
Of how that went down. So just a little bit of background on that. When Joel and I were at the LA Motor Show, I think is when we decided that we needed a brief, and you came up with the idea of let's do Mustang, and I was absolutely thrilled about that because I knew the students would be, and it was going to be just an exterior studio, but we thought it would be great if we could collaborate. Again, we've been doing a lot of collaborations at CCS, and so we decided to bring an interior studio taught by Kleber Vieira and an exterior studio taught by Hojin Kang together, and do it like they do it in the real world. Match the belt line, develop the package together, develop the concept together, and then break out and do your own work. And the extent to which the students successfully collaborated was really mind-blowing. And then the final production, as Jason said, when we had to pivot away from physical models, the interior students were always going to do digital, but the exterior students were planning on doing physical models, some clay, some initially digital, and then milled in hard foam. But we had to pivot away from that, and we decided that animations would be the final deliverable. So each team, we had 20 students, 10 teams, and each team did an animation.
So can I ask you a question, Paul? When you got the project set up with Joel, it was before lockdown.
That's right.
So at what point did it have to change the approach, or was it the same throughout? Even because we're talking about students working collaboratively, but they suddenly aren't in the same location and can't see anything. Was there a moment where you had to change the approach or the way that they communicate?
Well, absolutely. We were charging forward right up till midterm. Just coincidentally, the real serious lockdown from our federal government happened about mid-March, which just coincided with our midterm and our spring break. So the students made their midterm presentations in person to the Ford crew. They all came down. I think we were fist bumping and elbow bumping at that point, but still we weren't social distancing to the extent that we are now. And then word came out that we all had to disband, and start working and learning remotely. So we extended our spring break for about 1 week, and by the end of those 2 weeks, we didn't miss a beat. We were off and running. The students had all gone home, set up their studios, figured out how they were going to work. Some students had better computers than others, but we enabled remote access to our CCS workstations and facilities so that they could get the job done from their homes. And so the second half of the semester, the reviews that we had were all digital at that point. We were all remotely working.
We've got a question actually before I ask a question to Joel from the attendees. Did they use VRED to make this video?
The school supports a lot of different software platforms, so VRED was used by some teams, but I believe this particular video was done with Unreal Engine.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Joel, so you got a chance then to see this video a couple of weeks before last week's event. What did you think when you saw it? What was your instant reaction and things you'd seen before from CCS and the students from CCS?
Yeah, so as Jason articulated, the expectation going into the project was that the students would prepare three-dimensional scale models. And obviously the situation, pandemic hit, and as Paul mentioned, went in lockdown. But the pivot that the school and the students made to digital was absolutely phenomenal. And we were not expecting by any stretch of the means these amazing animations, one example you just saw. So that was just, it blew us away. Absolutely fascinating and really professional work. This is stuff that we do in the studios on a regular basis, and yet we weren't expecting to see it at the student level. And I think what's interesting is that this age of students and they're so native in the digital world. It's almost second nature to them. So I'm not sure if they've all had the experience of creating the animations, but they sure knocked it out of the park from a standpoint of being able to deliver and pivot in a time of not being able to produce two-dimensional properties. It's fantastic work.
And moving forward with forward projects, do you think this will become a requirement, a standard requirement, regardless whether we're in or out of lockdown?
So I think it's a really great way to tell more of a story. And part of our job as designers and educators is to be storytellers, to show how vehicles exist in an environment, how they help customers in their daily lives. So this is just another tool in the tool chest of being able to communicate to our leadership, our educators, and ultimately the customers of what these vehicles that we design can do for the company and do for our customers. So I think it's only going to become more and more popular and prevalent as the education moves on and as our digital technologies improve. Digital software is becoming much more user-centric, easy to use for the users, and it's just making it that much easier to create stunning imagery and tell these amazing stories to sell the concepts.
Thanks, Joel. Once this student's work has been shown, what was the feedback from other students, Jason, within the different levels? Was it shared with them, and what did they think of the work that had been shown to Ford?
I think universally the reaction was positive, and I think the other reaction was that they wanted to get in on the action too, if they weren't already. One of the nice things about, if you can say it's a outgrowth of going through a life event like this, is that it gives you a nudge forward in certain areas that you were kind of sticking your toe in the water on and you weren't quite sure of. Like a lot of educators were wondering if remote learning was going to be effective, in certain cases. And I know a lot of students were concerned, well, if I don't have a physical property, is that going to give the impression that something's missing in my skill set, or is it going to give me a disadvantage against someone else who has a physical property? And then when the pandemic hit, there was no more luxury to debate that. We just had to go and do it, and pivot like Paul and Joel have been saying, and just react. And the outgrowth of that has been, educators and students saying to themselves, you know what, this went a lot better than I thought it would. I guess we can work remotely in certain cases and have it be effective. And I guess we can, have a final presentation that's an all digital deliverable and have the same impact, or an even better impact, perhaps. I think those things are starting to occur to everybody. And going forward, I think it's, the best part is it opens up the imagination to a lot of possibilities that people hadn't thought of. I mean, nobody wanted this pandemic to happen, obviously. But if you think about the fringe things that you take from it, I mean, I think there's a lot that we can look at after the fact and say, this is, we've moved forward in a lot of ways.
Thanks, Jason. So, Paul, I got a question. So we've gone through the lockdown. We've realized that we're actually going to be stuck working remotely. You guys are still working remotely. I'm still working remotely. You've come up with a great vision, which we discussed a few weeks ago, about this virtual career event. Can you kind of run us through what the idea was in your head and how it was incorporated by the college itself as a whole?
Well, normally at the end of every school year in May, we have what we call an industry day, which coincides in the same week with our graduation ceremony, as well as our student exhibition opening. And it's just a fantastic show, and the student opening is a great party, and we have a lot of supporters come down, collecting artwork and looking at student work. Industry Day is highly attended, includes juniors and seniors, some rising sophomores on a case-by-case basis. Everybody gets to show their work, and it's just a great event. And so when we were notified that we had to restrict all kinds of social gatherings, obviously that was subject to cancellation. So we had to come up with some way of doing what we did virtually. And so, in discussions with school leadership, our career services network, and our marketing people, we decided to hold some kind of virtual event. And because this was the first time we did it, and it was absolutely critical that we support our graduates, we focused on the graduates only this year. And so we had about 45 companies all attending virtually or remotely, and about 28 students from transportation design alone, as well as many other departments in the school, all participating on the same day. About 3 or 4 hours, actually I think 2 or 3 hours it lasted. So yeah, we managed the best we could. I'm told it was a very satisfying event, and the students had a lot of great conversations. As you said earlier, some of the hiring has been just postponed more than canceled, just till the dust settles on some of the economic factors that are still in play. And on the other hand, some of the students who had already received offers, when you go to a premier school like CCS, you might receive an offer before you graduate. And most of those offers, to my knowledge, were honored, and those students will be starting very soon at various companies around Detroit and the world. So it came off pretty well. It wasn't the same as the in-person event, obviously, but the in-person event also had some drawbacks. For example, it became a very social event for all us, old timers, to see each other again. And when we'd be chatting away and getting, catching up, and the students would, they'd be like, why, I want to talk to this guy. And sometimes the design leadership wouldn't really be there for the social event. They wanted to look at the student work, but, out of politeness and courtesy, you do the best you can. So this kind of alleviated all that social side and focused strictly on the career side for these young people starting their future design roles. So it was good and bad.
Yeah, so Joel, you hear that there's going to be a virtual career event. What was your first impression once you heard about it, and what did you think? What was your expectations?
Yeah, I honestly didn't have any expectations necessarily from a standpoint of, how might it work out. We've been working from home for 2 months now. The element was, as kind of Paul mentioned, you get to spend a little more quality time with the students that you're interacting with, and you weren't distracted from the socialization aspect of seeing all your old classmates and co-workers. So I think really beneficial for the students in that regard. This was the first time for the school to implement this, and they pivoted very, very well. I think certainly there were some learnings, but also both in the positive sense as well as opportunities to improve. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes forward into the future once we get out of the situation that we're in, and if the school implements that elsewhere in the future. But I think it allowed for me, for example, it allowed me to interact with the students one-on-one. I was doing it via chat. Other people had opportunities to do it via webcam. So yeah, I think it worked out really well. Unfortunately, as everyone's mentioned, most of the companies are in a hiring freeze at the moment, but we at Ford remain optimistic that will be lifted hopefully by year's end. So look forward to bringing on some of those really talented students.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question, isn't it, Paul? If you have a student, and maybe this is a question for Joel, if you have a student that you want or have made a pre-offer to and you're going to take them, how would that situation work? Because we're in lockdown. Are we talking about them starting, or are you involved in those conversations on how that actually works? Joel, do you have any students who are starting in the next few months, and how is that going to work if you're still in lockdown?
I'm not sure we have students starting in design in the next few months, based on, I think Paul mentioned some early commitments. I don't think we've made any early commitments necessarily, but we certainly are interested in some of the students, and we've reached out to them to express our interest, but with the caveat, obviously, that we're kind of in a hiring freeze at the moment. But certainly wouldn't want to get in the way of a student taking another opportunity if they're able to secure it. But we remain confident again that we'll be able to bring new students on board later in the year.
What I've been told, Abel, is it's a very similar situation to what the designers that were already working professionally had gone through. However, without ever entering the building, the designers who are already working, as everybody probably knows who's watching this, one day you're told to pick up your workstation and go home and set it up and get to work. So what I've been told is that graduates who had been offered a position were told to drive to the design center campus, wait at a certain spot, and somebody bring out a computer for them, put it in a car, drive home, and get to work. That's pretty amazing, but yeah.
Wow. That sounds like, if it happens in downtown Detroit on Woodward, that sounds like an interesting scenario, going into the boot of a car and taking anything out of it. But I got a question. We've got these students Jason and Paul, is there anywhere on CCS's transportation design where we can look at the students' work online at the moment? Is that information available?
Well, I know that a lot of the students maintain their own Behance accounts and stuff, and most, especially our upperclassmen, are very diligent about making sure those are updated and showing their best work. But I believe we also have resources on the CCS website. Paul, you can probably speak more specifically about where they're located and what it's called.
That's right. Each graduate from this year from all the departments in the school, if you go to the CCS webpage and you navigate to the department you're interested in looking at, transportation design, and there's MFA and there's BFA, undergraduate and graduate, you can then see, I think, 3 to 5 samples of each student's work, as well as a biopic. So, and there's also a bit of a bio narrative about who they are and some of their design, thoughts about the work that viewers would be seeing. So yeah, we do have that, and that is the first time. We've always had a kind of gallery of student work, of course, just as we have a gallery of faculty work. But this is the first time we've done specific student by student presentations, I guess, of graduates. It's the first time we've had that on our website, and this is one thing that we'll definitely continue doing regardless of lockdown or otherwise, and hopefully get much better at it. We did have to pivot quite quickly to get the website updated. We weren't planning on doing this, so you see the biopics aren't uniform. The students provided their own biopics. But moving forward, that kind of thing is going to become a requirement for graduation. And so it'll be, it'll just keep getting better.
Yeah.
But yes, people can navigate to our webpage and see student work.
It's an interesting, Joel mentioned about, you're looking at the end of the year to take the students on. There's been a lot of press about well-being of the students, of design community. Something that possibly isn't discussed enough, maybe. In regards to, Jason, your younger students and some of the senior students as well, how is the college dealing with these challenging times where they're working remotely, jobs aren't coming in? Are you giving them any support from a well-being and a professional point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're always very mindful of that these are, especially the freshmen coming in, that these are evolving adults. They don't have the worldview that we have yet. They will eventually, but it's our job to encourage them and remind them that keep your eyes on 4 years, and at the end of that, hopefully you'll start the next chapter in your professional lives. One thing that I've definitely noticed with a lot of the students is that it's kind of a mixed bag. A lot of them went home. Some of them were local students. They stayed here. Some of them did a lot better when they had their family around them to rally them as sort of like moral support. And others found that was a distraction and made it really difficult for them to work. So it really depends on who you are, whether it was helpful or not. And obviously the technical aspect comes into play. Like if you're competing for bandwidth with your sibling who's playing Call of Duty, then that's a problem, and it's hard to log into a Zoom meeting. So there were those aspects as well. But the other thing that I've told students as kind of a perspective of being a professional, regardless of, obviously this was an extraordinary circumstance that nobody was expecting, but the industry, the history of the design industry and the car industry as a whole has been cyclical. There are up years and then there are down years, and then there are up years again and down. And like 1 year you'll have like a bunch of people hired, and next year it's like feast and famine. That's just the way it goes. And a lot of that's out of our hands. There's nothing we can do about it. So you hope that it works out okay, but you just make sure that you have contingency plans in place, and the key is to be versatile and resourceful, and you'll be fine.
Never stop updating your portfolio.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's critically important. But we just one more thing I'd like to add to that. We do have professionals on staff at CCS in the Wellness Center. You know, they're professionals in the sense that you know, they can help with psychological issues, depression issues, isolation, and this was in play for several years. So you know, some of the more as Jason said, some of the isolation issues or some of the distraction issues and focus and concentration is very different from being in the midst of all your peers and everybody being focused and kind of friendly competition that happens. We all know what that was like from being in design school. So they had to kind of pivot and figure that out on their own. And in addition to some students' home situations being better than others, some students had, you know, great Wi-Fi, and some students had really poor internet connections. Some students had a great computer at home, and other students were needing to remote access our workstations on campus, which we very quickly set up. So all in all, it was a real mixed bag, but very successful, I think, for everybody in general.
And Joel, you know, the well-being of the Ford team, or the young Ford team, the young designers that have come in, how have you dealt with supporting those guys?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Abel, the you know, how we've adapted as a global design team. Obviously, everyone's been working from home for the last 2 months. And we've conducted some internal assessments of our individual teams, and you know, like Jason mentioned, there's a mixed bag of responses depending on people's home situations. I'd say the majority find it very continuous, that they actually have some opportunity to focus more on their developing their design work with less distractions, being in a more public studio setting in the office. But obviously, a lot of people miss the day-to-day interaction with faces, having that face-to-face time to build relationships and camaraderie. So it's mixed, but nonetheless, we have some like after-hour get-togethers on Zoom, where we're just kind of talk about stuff outside of work. But I think really overall it's going quite well. So we're pleased with the results. We're not missing any of our deadlines from a design standpoint. So our programs are continuing to run, and really, you know, also at the behest of the technology, as we demonstrated last week with the virtual reality, and how significant a role that's been playing in working from home and being able to evaluate surfaces is really critical. And then, you know, to come back to the sponsored project that we did with the CCS students, really just shows a way forward in a post-pandemic world of how we can work from home and how we can have more flexibility in our professional lives and careers.
So that's an interesting segue. I mean, in regards to tech that you need moving forward, you know, we're talking about VRED, and we're talking about other systems, and we saw an amazing demonstration of a VR last week. Is there going to be a change of your recommendations to what students should have and be available remotely and on campus? I'm assuming you have quite a strong VR access at the college, but do you think it's going to become very important for them to have, or will you be advising them to have better technology at home?
It's interesting. I think, you know, it'll be up to the individual schools to determine how they want to establish their technology requirements. In the professional world, we're considering, you know, how do we provide the technology, flexible technology, if you will, to allow our staff to work from home and flex, for example, in and out of a physical work environment going forward. I'm sure we'll be having discussions with CCS, for example, and just the learnings from the sponsored project with the fantastic animations and how that really replaced the three-dimensional model. Again, I think that's just it's another tool for the creative types to embrace and to build on. So going forward, I think again there's still going to be a mix of tools that we deploy, but certainly the digital world is really gaining traction. And Ford's been using the digital world for many years now, but probably in the last 2 to 3 years is when it's really gotten strong legs, and we've been able to really stand up digital design departments and support it in a way that is bearing fruit to the company in the overall bottom line. So we also look to the schools to kind of guide us and see where the young talent coming out of the schools, what they're embracing. We're exposed to certain technologies, but I think the schools have an ability to embrace technologies that are at the cutting edge and try these technologies out. So it'll be an interesting dynamic to see what happens going forward. It's we're 2 months into this, but a lot has happened in a very positive sense.
So Paul and Jason, is there going to be, do you think there will be recommendations to students to look at different technology or have access to it remotely as opposed to relying exclusively on the school?
Well, we're planning on opening in September and kicking off the fall semester in a hybrid mode. So we're going to reduce class sizes and through a blended presentation of interaction and physical interaction, we're going to figure out a way through this. And as a requirement of the hybrid format, students, we need to level the playing field in regards to the access to the technology. Many of our students come from local areas, they're not wealthy, and they were disadvantaged in the sense that they didn't have a powerful computer to have the software running on their own computer, so needed to remote access in. We've improved that system since just the semester ended. But we will need some kind of computer policy for each student to adhere to, just so that every student is having a very similar experience, regardless of their economic situation. But one thing additionally that I'd like to add to the conversation is my conviction is that those animations would not have been as impressive and exciting and successful if those students had not had a freshman year and a sophomore year of all traditional skills and traditional materials and tools, drawing on paper, really understanding what it is they're trying to visualize three-dimensionally, and then sculpting different, using different materials, whether it be foam or clay. Those kinds of foundational experiences result in outstanding results when we set the students free in the junior and senior year with all our amazing technological resources. So we're kind of doubling down on both. We have no intention of getting rid of clay, but at the same time, we're opening up a VR classroom in the fall. We've had VR, but this will be the first time we're actually going to be teaching classes in VR. So each student will have a headset on campus in that classroom. And then, of course, because COVID continues, we're going to be very diligent about the disinfecting and UV zappers, disinfecting wipes, of course, all around the workstations, the keyboards, the VR headsets critically. So we're doubling down in both ways. We're going to make it happen. But I think learning the traditional skill sets is what makes these masterful animations resulting after the fact. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Paul 100%. It's one of the biggest challenges I have as a freshman instructor is that students are so eager. They're just clamoring to get into digital stuff as soon as they can. They're like a horse in a starting gate. They can't wait for that door to open. And I keep telling them, look, you'll get there, but they have to remember that a Cintiq or Unreal Engine or any of these digital tools, it is just that. It's a tool. It's not a creative instrument. It doesn't design anything. It's up to them to add the creative variable. I mean, there are certain instances, like, for example, computational modeling, where there's a bit of an automatism that goes on there. But by and large, Paul's absolutely right. All the creativity and the beautiful surfacing that you saw there, it all starts with the fundamental classes that we teach, both in terms of visual communication and freshman transportation and design theory, the thought that goes on.
Design theory is a huge part of it.
Before you even get to that point. So, definitely, we're not slowing down on any of that stuff just because technology is taking such huge leaps forward. And a lot of times that involves tough love with the students and tell them, look, you're not ready for this yet. Because I've seen many instances in the past where a digital tool, if a student goes into it too quickly, it actually has a way of highlighting their deficiencies, and nobody wants that.
Yeah,
So,
I like to compare it to, an electric guitar and an amplifier. Before you really get good at it, do you really want it to be extremely loud? When you're just learning, you're probably going to practice a lot without the amp on, if not only to make sure your friends and family aren't completely offended, but when you get good at it, then yeah, crank it up to 11 and show the world. So whether it's Photoshop or whether it's polygonal modeling, all these things, they could be shortcuts for a skilled designer, or they can amplify the ignorance and the lack of training that you haven't accomplished yet. And those, training and ignorance, those are eradicated with a good education.
I can see Joel nodding. Do you agree with the comments that I made?
Yeah, it really is what Jason and Paul are all saying, is that you really have to walk before you can run. Yeah. And to learn the basics of proportion, perspective, harmony, balance, and then basic shading, and then you get into reflections and such, and how reflections are applied to surfaces, and then there's also the art of understanding a physical form through manual modeling, and to do that is a building block to become better in the digital world. Whether it's 2D sketching into Photoshop, into speed form modeling, or whether it's from building a clay pot on a throwing wheel to modeling a car in clay, to doing alias or polygonal modeling. These are all steps in becoming real professional and understanding what really is needed to get to that level. I think it's been alluded to that some of these digital tools are perhaps a band-aid or a covering to mask the underlying issue that some people are trying to cover up. But really have to start with the basics, and I think, Paul, you mentioned it. Your first and second years at the school are very critical to build up those essential techniques. And I don't think sketching is ever going to go away, no matter how great people are and become in the three-dimensional world. It's probably one of the fastest ways to get an idea out of your mind and into the physical world. So again, this digital world is just tools to amplify the best of talent.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you've we had a great session last week looking at VR, but you're saying that the fundamentals are extremely important, and I can see the passion in Jason that he's instilling in the students about the importance of it, and being recognized by you, Joel, is great because, yeah, and some really nice examples of horse racing and playing the guitar. I can do neither of those, by the way. But it's great to see that you realize that there is a process they have to go through. So having that opportunity, and thank you, Paul, for explaining on how the college is going to open. It was some of the questions that have been asked about what's going to happen, how is it going to work, but you've been very clear on your direction, which is great to hear. I do have a question because CTS has a mixture of both local students but international. How can you see the international base changing? How is it going to operate with travel restrictions? Have you already looked into that?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see what happens as far as the travel restrictions go, and that's going to be instrumental in determining whether or not students will even be able to arrive in September for classes. But this whole thing has inspired, or let's say motivated, a broader conversation about remote learning. And so we're talking about ways of implementing that on a more regular basis to expand our offerings globally without the necessity to be on campus. But that's very early discussions. We're just investigating that. We hope to continue to have the extraordinarily diverse community, men, women, Asian, Western, South American. It's really a wonderful place and a wonderful department from a diversity point of view. We have a super diverse faculty as well, and I don't want that to change, but at the same time, we do want to continue to grow and offer experiences to people who can't manage to be here in person. So early days to say anything definitive about how that's going to happen. The government regulations from all the nations of the world will play a big role. But one way or another, we're going to do our best to make it happen.
It's great to hear that you're not ignoring that and are going to address that situation, because I think the diversity within a college or a student base, or even a car maker like Ford, is an important part of developing global products, I guess. Joel, when was the last time you got on a flight, and how does it feel not traveling so much? Because I see you around the world or in airports. How has it been not traveling?
Well, it's been a nice reprieve in some regards. At the same time, it distances you from experiencing the cultures in region and seeing in face to face those your colleagues you work with on a regular basis. But I'm confident we'll be past this in soon enough time that we'll be able to travel again. But certainly the situation is given us the opportunity to figure out ways to be equally as effective in this digital world, as much so as it is in the physical world.
Yeah, and I just want to say, if I can give Jason and Paul an opportunity just to wrap up the live stream. We've got a group of students here, quite a lot of international students, domestic ones, obviously ones that are based at the college as well as professional designers. Is there something you'd like to share with them about what the college has done, currently done and moving forward, just to inspire them? Can I hand over to you, Jason, first?
Well, I think the best thing that we can tell them is that we're being versatile and looking at a lot of different strategies going forward to educate them. But having just been through this one previous semester where it was like half what we planned and half where we had to improvise, I think Paul would agree with me, and Joel too, that as much trepidation as we had going into this situation, the results exceeded expectations. And I think that gives us, obviously there are situations down the line in the fall. There's a lot of stuff that's still a question mark. It's like a dark road, unlit, in front of you. You're not quite sure what's ahead. But I think we have every reason to be positive based on what we just went through. I think it was Henry J. Kaiser who said, problems are just opportunities in working. And that kind of positive outlook, I think, is key. And I think it's important for them to know that no matter what we face, no matter what's coming at us, that's the approach of the people leading them into it. We don't feel hamstrung by this. We don't feel like this is a terrible thing, you know, that we wish that we could just turn back the clock. And I mean, obviously everyone would like to do that, but we see this as an opportunity. We see this as a chance for all of us, educators and students, to grow. And I think we've already started on that path. And I think in the fall, they're going to see more of the same.
That's right. That was really well put, Jason. And you know, we look at this as any design problem. You have to iterate, and we just got through a series of iterations. Some were hugely successful, and some were not so much. You know, specific complaints from students like accessing remotely the CCS high power workstations. It was just, there was a lot of lag. So we've already addressed that. That's going to be much faster in the fall. We have an entirely new server system already in place. So the school has decided to double down on the technological aspect, because we realize how important that's going to be. And then, you know, we also learned a lot from the virtual career day. There were some long lines with the most popular companies. So how can we get hiring managers all together in one booth with a student visually? How can we expand that over a longer period of time so more students have access to those important interviews and conversations with design leadership globally? So we've iterated, we've made mistakes. This is what we tell students to do all the time. You have to try something. Not showing up is not an option. So you have to try something, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, you try something else. So we've learned an enormous amount. We had some great successes, and we're going to continue to, I think, be leaders in the design education field globally.
Joel, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just second what the guys have said. You know, we're doing similar things in the professional world as well, of you know, making contingency efforts and looking at ways from working remotely globally. You know, just one example, we have one designer who is on assignment in Europe to our German studio, but he's working in Italy, and he went back to India where his family is. During the pandemic, so he's been in India working remotely. So you know, it's really fascinating how this connectivity can keep us all united, no matter what corner of the world we're in. And if we're doing it professionally, the schools can do it at an educational level. Hopefully, we all wish and desire to get back to a more physical, face-to-face world. But this is also providing us an opportunity to see where we can be more efficient in some cases. So education will always be there, and look forward to seeing how CCS adapts and progresses from this. And it's you know, the future is still bright.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joel. We've got some good news. We are continuing our support of CCS and the students. We're really looking forward, and I was discussing with Paul and Jason before how we're going to, once CCS gets the work to us, because it was something we'd usually do physically, if you like, maybe through support of people locally. So we will continue to support CCS. We will have the degree shows for CCS and all the major colleges coming up on Car Design News. It is a fluid situation, guys. I think we all know that. So they will be coming up. And one of the exciting things we have committed to is at the end of this year, maybe in the first quarter, we will do a review of the best students across the world, which will be a great fun activity for CDN to do. And we look forward to seeing the students work. I want to thank the guys at CCS. You're doing a great job, and thank you for coming up and being very honest to some of your answers. And a special thanks to Joel for supporting the students and making himself available today. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Abel. Thank you, Joel. Thanks
This will
so
be
much.
recorded, and next week we've got our live stream will be with GAC. We'll have guys in California, guys in China, guys in Germany. It should be a fun talking to what those guys are doing working remotely. So thanks again, and look forward to seeing you all on the next live stream. Thanks, guys.
Abel.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.